My live stream will begin shortly.
I'm going to start again in case I was on mute. Welcome back and welcome to the BenDaniel Venture Challenge. For those of you that were not on the eLab demo day that we just had, welcome to Celebration. I'm Zach Schulman, the Director of Entrepreneurship at Cornell. So the BenDaniel Venture Challenge is hosted by BR Ventures, which is a student-run venture fund at Cornell's Johnson Graduate School of Management. I actually used to be the faculty advisor for the fund way back in the early 2000s. It was a really wonderful group, and I'm sure it still is. The Venture Challenge is named after our amazing colleague, David BenDaniel, who many of you know. David passed away a few years ago, but wonderfully, his legacy lives on with us, particularly with BR Ventures. I'm pleased to introduce Grant Rollins, a BR Ventures team member who is going to be the MC of the challenge. So Grant, take it from here.
Sorry, everyone. Thanks, Zach, for the introduction. As we said, welcome to the 2021 BenDaniel Venture Challenge, part of Cornell's Entrepreneurship Celebration. My name is Grant Rollins, and I'm a fund manager for Big Red Ventures, again, Cornell's early stage venture capital fund. Big Red Ventures is part of the greater entrepreneurship community here at Cornell, and is comprised of graduate students in the Johnson School of Management, Cornell Tech, as well as law and PhD students. On behalf of the fund, I'm happy to continue the legacy of Dr. David J. BenDaniel, who was a professor of entrepreneurship here at Cornell, as well as the founder of Big Red Ventures. This competition awards up to $50,000 in cash prizes to Cornell or New York-based startups. This year, we had over 60 applications from first-time founders to serial entrepreneurs, and I'm happy to announce this year's 6 finalists. In alphabetical order, they are Buzr, Inverse, INSO Biosciences, Organic Robotics, Helix, and Simba. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our panel of investor judges, Megan Cross from Amplify Her Ventures, Eric Young from Canaan Partners, and Andrew Schoen from New Enterprise Associates. Among many variables, the teams will be judged on their value proposition, the market that they're addressing, as well as their pitch quality, and ultimately, if it is an investable idea. Teams will have 8 minutes to pitch their company, followed by 7 minutes from the judges. Good luck to everyone, and first up, we have Buzr.
Hello, everybody. We're Buzr, and we are connecting your phone to your intercom. My name is Tony Liebel. I'm a JCT MBA of 20 and co-founder CEO of Buzr. I'm also a former management consultant.
And I'm Jeremy. I'm the other co-founder and the product lead, and I'm a Cornell Tech EE alum from last year as well.
So I have a quick story for you guys. In 2015, I moved to New York City as a management consultant, and every day or every week, I came home to problems with the front door of my building. It typically was a note from FedEx or UPS saying that they missed me to drop off my package, or that my Airbnb guests were having trouble to get in. I was even burying keys in the cracks of my sidewalk to try to get these guests into my building, which isn't the most welcoming experience when you're coming from an international location. When you walk through New York City, even today, you'll find that many people have this problem. You find these people having the problem or the solutions of really just putting notes on their door, asking for the UPS driver to give them a call, or for their friend to give them a call because the Buzr system doesn't work. The common denominator is ancient entry technology. These intercom systems are built on late 1800s electrical technology and were installed often as early as the early 1900s. They're in buildings without doormen. The size of this problem is astronomical. So 2.4 million apartments in New York City alone do not have a doorman, and it represents almost 2% of the entire US population. 90,000 packages a day are going missing or stolen, and 30% of packages are undelivered on their first attempt in New York City, according to the Wall Street Journal. The older the building, the older the intercom system, and those older buildings are in old cities. Old cities are overseas, they're not in our young country. We found that there's 150 million apartments overseas that have this problem. So our vision is Buzr was founded under the belief that your living experience should not be determined by the date your building was built.
And we executed on this vision by developing the Buzr Pro. Buzr Pro is a beautiful piece of hardware with a connected app that allows the resident to now bring their apartment into the current 21st century. Specifically, our app allows users to have access to virtual keys for their guests, as well as multiple apartments, environment monitoring, as well as the traditional remote buzz, talk, and listen, which we are focusing on, and a activity log for increased security. So what makes Buzr unique? If you think of traditional smart home products, you'll notice that there's not really any solution out there for the front door of multi-tenant buildings. And if you think of traditional smart intercom stations, which although they're fairly new, they actually require a full building renovation, which is incredibly costly, upwards of $150,000, and very disruptive because you have to rip all the wiring out of the entire building. What we do is we replace only the intercom station that's in the original apartment unit, and we interface directly with the existing wiring in a way that's so simple that the actual resident can do it themselves. Specifically, very similar to a Nest thermostat, you take your old device off the wall, disconnect the wires, attach our mount plate, and connect the wires into our mount plate as per the instructions in our mobile app. Snap our device onto the mount plate, connect to Wi-Fi, and you're good to go. Now, Buzr touches a lot of people in a lot of different areas. And so I wanted to just highlight a handful of those for you today. So Buzr is less expensive and easier to install than any of the competition. As I mentioned, this allows for non-disruptive, lower cost installations to allow for the new technology that we're introducing to the residents. In terms of real estate professionals, Buzr is the fastest and cheapest way to be able to advertise an apartment as having a virtual doorman. As people start to return to New York City and the real estate market heats back up again, having a small edge like this could mean everything to a real estate professional. As well as from the pandemic, we're seeing a huge uptick in self-guided tours. Buzr simply enables that. In terms of energy, we help to reduce fines and excess heating bills by allowing both the resident and the landlord to monitor the current temperature of the apartment. This ensures that the apartment is kept within the specified range of heating in the winter and cooling in the summer, as defined by the laws in New York City. And finally, obviously, Buzr reduces package theft simply by allowing that the delivery people, whenever they have a package, will be allowed into your building, and people that don't have a delivery for you will not.
We price ourselves just like any other smart home device. Where hardware cost is $229, we have a freemium app that unlocks other features for $7 per month, and we have management software for $2 per unit per month if you're a landlord. If you don't feel like going through that install process, we'll send someone out to you for $99 to install it. Our total addressable market is $55 billion in one-time unit sales and $6 billion in annual subscription revenue. We did a bottoms-up market size of the 9 oldest cities in the US for $1.2 billion in one-time unit sales. Our go-to-market is three-pronged. We go directly to the residents because they feel the pain, and often they have the apathetic landlords. We go to the landlords because they're discovering how expensive it is to install these smart intercom systems. And we also are working with any company that is frustrated with the front door and their last mile logistics, companies like FedEx, UPS, Amazon, or Fresh Direct. We've started with the residents and we have some traction. We have 450 people on our wait list. We just opened up our pre-sale campaign and we have 17 pre-sales. 21% of our visitors to our website click our buy now button and seem to maybe be turned off by the pre-sale because we are 9 months out from shipping. We also have an average of 44 seconds on our website, which is an eternity in the world of the internet. Some of our accomplishments over the last year: we have universal compatibility for audio, buzz, and ring on analog systems. We are patent pending We're a winner of Cornell's Engineering Innovation Competition. We're a winner of the Cornell Tech Startup Awards class of 2020. And we're here as finalists at BenDaniel's Challenge of 21. And we are Aero certified for manufacturability. We needed a lot of help. We have a lot of help to have those accomplishments. We have a team of 15 engineers that work with Jeremy and myself, as well as this awesome group of advisors, investors, and partners. We have help from SpaceX sourcing. Cornell Tech is our largest investor. We're part of the AWS startup team for our backend support. We work with Jerry Media for our advertising, and we have the former CEO of Jabil Circuit and Sanmina as our manufacturing help advisor. So what's next for Buzr? We're beginning our manufacturer search in mid-May. We're shipping in winter of 21. We're seeking letters of intent from New York City area buildings. We're preparing for a seed raise in early Q3, and we have an open safe for strategic investors. Thank you so much. We're Buzr. Please find more at getbuzr.com.
Thank you, Buzr. Does the investor panel have any questions?
Yeah, happy to start with one on the competitive landscape. This is Andrew here from NEA. Obviously there have been a couple of big news events in the space recently with SmartRent going public via a SPAC, which is another venture-backed company in the category. You've also got folks like Vivint, Smart Home kind of making inroads into and then back out of the space again. You've got entrenched players like Butterfly MX. How do you think about differentiation from both a product and a go-to-market standpoint relative to that competitive backdrop?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So Latch and Butterfly MX we follow very closely, and their products serve new builds. So if you take a look at Latch's website, they boast, and rightfully so, that they're in 1 in 10 new apartments in the U.S. If you look at their biggest investor, Brookfield Asset, they boast that they're building 1 in 10 new buildings in the U.S. So the way that we differentiate is serving a market that has been kind of forgotten. So the Rings and Nests of the world, they went directly to the consumer, right to the resident. And Latch and Butterfly MX, they're going to the landlords of really big, really nice buildings. Where Buzr fits in is to the vast majority of the residents that don't live in those brand new buildings and either want to upgrade on their own, or to the landlords that it doesn't make financial sense to rip out all of the wires in the building to install something as smart as a Latch or a Butterfly MX.
Great, thank you.
So Tony, the authentication that occurs when somebody shows up at the door to visit or deliver or whatever is purely audio based between
Correct.
the resident and the person who's buzzing at the door, correct?
So it is at the conversation level, yes. However, we do have an open API for a UPS or an Amazon, where they would get an authenticated virtual key and they'd be able to buzz themselves in on a one-time use basis. So basically, the dream is, we're not there yet. Buzr would know that UPS is bringing you a package, and the door automatically buzzes open when UPS shows up.
Right. But until that time, there has to be some sort of verbal interaction between the resident and the visitor to provide whatever level of comfort is needed for them to open the door.
So we have a way around that. What we do is we have a virtual key with an individual PIN that we encourage our beta users to put into the delivery instructions when you make a purchase. And basically what happens is the UPS guy shows up to the door, they buzz the doorbell, you might be in a meeting and you can't answer the app, or you're not home. And they see in the delivery instructions, if they call this phone number and enter a PIN, the door will buzz for them. So we do have a way around it for right now. It's just not as sexy as we'd like it to be.
Have you talked with UPS and others like that about the degree of burden that may be associated with that in the delivery process?
We had a conversation with the innovation team at UPS quite some time ago. Because we're not in market yet, it's not particularly interesting to them yet.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a little bit of a chicken and the egg problem of we can open every door for them and they'd love to talk, but we have to open the door for them first.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for your presentation. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about what needs to happen between now and I guess Q3 in order to get those early points of validation with regard to the onboarding process. And the reason why I'm asking that too, just to provide some context, is you have like a stacked marketing team of resources there. Seem like they would be, well, A, expensive, but B, very involved from your time standpoint too. So like, what needs to be done before you invest your time and resources into marketing?
Into marketing, yes. So we have some announcements to make before that Q3. One is that our industrial design is changing. It's going to look a little bit less sport. The device will look a little bit more or less sport car chic and a little bit more homey. Some more fabrics and soft plastics. So around that launch of the new device is when we also would be announcing our real big pre-sale campaign and our launch into the New York market in January of 21. Before then, we also want to validate a few more things on the technical side, as always. We did an alpha in May of last year, and we have one unit installed here in New York City, which is our final hardware design. And we're starting our CM search, as I mentioned, in about a month now, or less than a month.
Got it.
I hope I answered your question.
You did. Most of all, that pre-sale piece is perhaps the most interesting from the standpoint of like building that community and pre-baking the interest before.
Yeah.
Knowing where exactly to put fuel on.
Yep. So we are testing pre-sale, as I mentioned. Our current customer acquisition cost is about $100 per pre-sale. We did an experiment over the last 4 weeks to try to decide if we could support ourselves on pre-sales alone, basically run our own Kickstarter campaign. We also looked into doing Indiegogo and Kickstarter, but we determined that the benefits that you get from a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo is their email base, their customer base, and we weren't able to determine if our customers are in that email list that they provide. But as anything with pre-sale, it's basically people really want the thing they purchased 2 days later or 6 days later, and very few people are willing to take the risk on another one of those hardware devices that you don't know when it's going to arrive at the door.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you to the Buzr team. Thank you for the questions from the judges. Next, we have heat inverse. Ready, team heat inverse?
Yeah, I requested a couple times, but I'm not sure it's taking. I think it's working now. Good afternoon. My name is Romy Fain, and I'm the CEO of Heat Inverse. And we make thin films that get cold without any additional energy input or moving parts or waste heat generated. And we use this to cool refrigerated trailers and save customers millions of dollars in diesel expense. So a little bit about my background first. I have an undergraduate in mechanical engineering from UC Berkeley, where I did a lot of alternative energy harvesting research before coming to Ithaca and doing my PhD in electrical engineering at Cornell. That research was based in mid-infrared photonics, so long wavelengths, but light at small scales, but long wavelengths that correlate to heat. And for that, I actually have more than 15 years experience as an entrepreneur in manufacturing and prototyping. And so what we're doing with Heat Inverse is actually spans that experience. And we're making these films. They look like this, if you can see in the little tiny picture. We're making films that are, both real world, practical, durable, scalable materials that are actually metamaterials to dissipate heat more effectively. As you can imagine, there's a lot of applications for technology like this. For some reason, my slides are auto forwarding, so I apologize for that. But we have a lot of applications in power generation and storage, transmission lines, buildings, building envelopes with like windows and roofs, but in transportation with electric vehicle roofing systems, et cetera, but especially with cold chain and refrigerated trailers. So our mission is to revolutionize cooling technologies and profitably reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least a gigaton at full deployment. Because the problem at a larger scale is that heat-related inefficiencies cost trillions of dollars and gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions every year. And more specifically, with refrigerated trucking, our beachhead market, we spend more than $6 billion a year just on diesel for cooling refrigerated trailers. And at Heat Inverse, we make these thin films that get cold without any additional energy input. And this provides about 5 kilowatts of cooling per trailer. And 5 kilowatts of cooling is about, happens to be about 25 to 80% of the cooling capacity that's required for these kind of trailers. We'll base the price on about 1 year's estimated fuel savings, which is $2,600 per year. And I'm gonna also tell you a little bit on the sideline about how this works, because I always get questions about that. So first of all, the atmosphere of the planet is transparent at some wavelengths, and that's the reason why we see the sun. But we're actually making use of these other windows that we can't see as humans that are longer wavelengths. So kind of like a water wheel makes use of potential energy of water flowing downhill, we're making use of this very large temperature gradient between the surface of the planet and outer space. The way that we do that is we make these hyper emitters that emit really strongly in these wavelengths where the atmosphere is transparent. And when you do that, it's like you're taking that emitter out of the insulating thermos that is the atmosphere and exposing it to the biggest cold sink you could ever get, which is outer space. And then it's just second law of thermodynamics. Heat always wants to go from hot to a cold surface. And we're left with on the order of about 100 watts per square meter of cooling, or roughly 10 degrees C as a sort of rule of thumb. And we like to call this a reverse greenhouse effect, because instead of trapping heat on the planet, we're allowing it to get whisked away. And we have great unit economics because the cost to manufacture these materials is vastly outweighed by the value that it generates. So for example, like we were saying, $2,600 per trailer, the cost to manufacture is really only under $500. And this results in a large market with huge potential impact. So there's definitely large global and markets globally and also in the United States, but we're really hyper-focused on this more efficient $121 million market. That is, it's a annualized market based on bottom-up analysis on 1/5 of the trailers based on that 1 year of 5 lifetime of the materials. And that number is based on the number of trailers with the companies that we're focused on that own large refrigerated trucking fleets. And we're really poised to dominate this market because we can provide on areas that are most important to our customers. We can provide this really large savings at very low cost, very easy application, and high durability. But more than that, we're also have a really great potential for partnerships with these potential potential competitors. Sorry, because basically our materials don't displace any of these other technologies, so we can just as easily work in partnership. This is what our pipeline looks like right now. We actually have a lot others on that won't fit on the slide, but we're working on pilots with local customers right now this summer, including Wegmans, and then we'll start on our international pilots starting in the fall, where we have agreements for purchases by 2022 with a completion of successful pilots. We're really accelerating from a solid foundation because we have defensible IP. We've got multiple paid pilots. Thanks to NSF SBIR phase 1, we've got the scaled up large area format materials that we can use on these kind of pilots and for sales. We've had early success raising capital. We're at about 750,000 right now, mostly in grants and a little bit in convertible note investments, and we expect that to be over $1 million by the end of the summer. And so we've got multiple large markets that we can look forward to after we nail our beachhead market. And we've got really strong customer interest, especially in that beachhead market where they are always looking for ways to cut their fuel costs. And our team is very strong, both on the technical side and on the business side, including Professor Montecone, who is a professor in electrical engineering here at Cornell. But other than that, we've got more than 30 people who are contributing their time volunteering, working at way below market rate, and to make this happen. So with that, I would love to answer any questions you might still have.
Thank you, Rami. Judges?
Rami, the 25 to 80% savings that you suggested, is that off of the energy costs that is specifically used for cooling in these vehicles, or is that the running the vehicle, transportation plus cooling?
Yeah, it's not the tractor. It's just the trailer. So just the cooling part. Although we are testing some of the effects of our materials on the engines of some box trucks starting in the fall with some of these international pilots, because cooling, in really hot temperatures, cooling an engine will help with the efficiencies. So there's potential for that. But what I'm talking about with that 25 to 80% is really aggregate average numbers of how much cooling power is needed to cool trailers, refrigerated trailers.
How many actual vehicles have you been able to apply this to get real world data collected so far?
Yeah, so we're working with Wegmans right now. So this is in progress. the data that we have is primarily in-house. We've done some preliminary like thermal imaging data kind of stuff, but not the power comparison data yet. We should have that by the end of the summer at the very latest. But what we have are these refrigerated boxes, and I'm not sharing slides anymore, or else I'd show you. But we have these portable refrigerators where we put the materials on one and not on the other one, and then measure the electrical power needed to keep them both at the same set temperature. And you can see there's a wide difference between the two.
Understand.
And lots of other ways that we measure, like measure the cooling power directly. That's the standard way to do this in this, in this type of research. So like measuring how, cooling power in watts per meter squared directly, because those other measurements are more like a demonstration of how it could be applied on a refrigerated unit, because it's highly dependent on the efficiency of the system that you're applying it to, if that makes sense.
I understand. Last question for me. Was the IP developed at Cornell and licensed from Cornell?
No, it was developed after I completed my PhD. I did research in mid-infrared photonics, so in the field, but not this specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just a quick one from me. Impressive, pipeline. Are you guys revenue positive? If so, what are the kind of current deployments look like? At what scale are those?
So we have paid pilot agreements. We don't have the money in the bank yet, because they're going to be happening at the end of the summer and in the fall. But yeah, and then we're expecting to have regular sales starting in Q1 of next year.
Okay, got it. So the data that you have right now is based on sort of your internal tests, not based on an active deployment yet. So you'll be doing your first deployment soon.
That's right. That's right.
Great, exciting.
Yes. Long time coming with getting these materials in large enough format that we could do that. So we'd had small pieces that it wouldn't really make sense to try and put over a 53-foot trailer. But so now we got that funding from the SBIR phase 1 to do that, and that's opened up this ability to do the pilots. And yeah, we're super excited about it.
Yeah, Rami, I'm particularly great to hear about the Wegmans partnership and everything that's about to happen. I think we first were learning about Heat Inverse was like 2018 on my end, I guess. But so awesome, congrats on everything. My question is, do you mind describing in a little bit more detail what the current solution that a Wegmans would use right now? Like, what is that alternative that is the norm right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the sort of general things are getting a little bit more efficient refrigeration unit, or getting a little bit better insulation replaced, or but then there's also newer solutions that are coming in that people are trying, like painting the top white. So they're trying that right now, and I'm like, well, we can do better than that, because we have high reflectivity with our opaque version, so we can reject almost all of that solar thermal heating, and do this other additional emissive cooling part from the materials themselves. So
got it. So the things that your potential customers and current customers are doing right now is basically just a bunch of makeshift band-aids that don't actually achieve that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's most of the solutions that most of the customers are familiar with only do maybe 1 or 2% efficiency increase. Like one of the manufacturers that we spoke to that we'll be doing pilots with later said that before we told them what we were doing in customer discovery, they told us about this 1.5% efficiency increase that they got from this much more complicated, harder to implement solution. And we're looking at each other like, okay, we can do better than that. This feels good.
Great, thanks.
Well, thank you, judges, and thank you, Heat Inverse. Next, we have INSO Biosciences.
Okay. Hi, all. I don't think I have control of the slides just yet, but I'll just say that nice to meet you guys. My name is Harvey, and I'll be presenting for INSOBIO. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to tell our story here today. We're an early stage biotech spin-out from Cornell University, and we're developing a platform to handle cells and process them as a front end to DNA sequencing and genomic analysis. Okay, still no control, but if you guys can just advance the slides, that's okay too. Okay, thank you. All right, so DNA sequencing has been evolving very rapidly, and in the 80s, what took an international team of scientists 10 years and $1 billion to sequence the human genome for the first time can now be done by a single scientist in under a day for less than $1,000. And this rapid evolution is occurring in leaps. So what we consider standard today with Illumina sequencing, that's actually based on short read technology, but there's a new wave coming using what's called long read. And this has extra benefits. And some of you may know that the leading long read sequencing company in the world, Pacific Biosciences, actually came out of Cornell. Next, please. So to quickly go over the differences between short and long read, I'll just use this analogy that if sequencing and rebuilding a genome is like rebuilding a book, next, then short read sequencing would be like rebuilding that book with small paper scraps, where each piece of DNA has very little information and it's difficult to rebuild that entire book. In some cases, it's entirely impossible, regardless of how good the bioinformatics is. Whereas for long read, that's like if we were to try to rebuild that same book, but now we have entire pages instead of just scraps. It's much easier to reconstruct the genome accurately. And this is especially important in applications such as cancer genomics, where patients generally have highly mutated or irregular genomes. And if you want to take a precision medicine approach, you really need an accurate profiling of their genetics. Next. So why isn't long read out there more? Well, because the approach is so new. Next. The sample prep hasn't quite been figured out yet. And the essence of the problem is that because there's long pieces of DNA now rather than short, handling that piece of DNA, even gentle handling, can break the DNA. This causes sample degradation, a whole host of other problems. Most products on the market handle the DNA a lot and handle it in very rough ways. So to kind of translate what that means for the customer, I'll use a use case scenario. So if you could hit next again. So I'll just introduce Sarah. That's an example of somebody we spoke to when we talked with over 140 potential users of our technology when we participated in the NSF I-Corps last year. So Sarah has about half a dozen techs who work under her, and they're all highly trained and regularly perform sample prep for her. But even then, it takes them a long time and it's difficult to get a high quality sample. So what this often causes is the entire sequencing run to fail. Sarah has to scrap that run, restart, loses her time and money. Also, she also loses her clients' samples, which is very embarrassing for her. This all adds to her 3 to 6 month long project backlog, and she often has to turn down projects because there isn't enough sample. She knows that by the time she processes it and loses it, there won't be enough to go through with sequencing. Next slide. So how are we going to solve Sarah's problem? We're going to take all that complexity that's involved with sample prep right now. We're going to streamline that workflow into an automatable platform system that has high precision. Next. And we can make that possible using our, next please, our proprietary microfluidic technology. So this is developed out of Cornell. It's been patented and licensed by us. And what this technology does is it uses an entire sort of forest of microstructures, and we call it micropillar array. And it traps the cells that we load in. It can also then lyse the cell upon introduction of a lysis buffer and pull out the DNA in this extremely long, elongated format and do so very gently without damaging that DNA. And on top of that, we can purify that DNA in the same single step as the extraction. So we're the only technology that can do a physical purification of the DNA gently during the extraction. So what you see here in this video, that's played in real time of a human cancer cell being popped and the DNA is being extracted onto the pillars. You don't see the DNA, but that's what's happening. Next slide. So we're going up next. So we're going after a $200 to $300 million subsection of the greater sequencing sample prep market. And next, please. And our plan is to go after people like Sarah as our first target users. She has a burning need. We've already begun. Next, could you just click through to step 4? Thanks. Yeah, so we've already begun developing relations with people like Sarah. We're going to demonstrate the value of our platform to her. And then once that's demonstrated, we're going to begin offering her a service so that we can offload some of that project backlog while we finish building the system on our end. Then once we get the early units done, we can lease them out to Sarah and begin making recurring revenue sales on the chips, demonstrating traction and getting some cash. So once we have a little bit more resources under our belt, further down the road, we want to expand into bigger and other customer segments that we want to eventually be in, which is like pharma or clinical labs. Next slide. So the technology comes out of Professor Craighead's research lab at Cornell, and it's based on more than 20 years of research. Professor Harold Craighead is also one of our co-founders, and he also co-founded Pacific Biosciences, sort of this leading long-read sequencing company that would be taking the samples from our platform and be the direct downstream to us. I did my PhD with Harold and have spent about 11 plus years further developing the underlying foundation to this technology. And our third co-founder, Adam, joined us back in 2017, brought on board a deep background in molecular biology, which we were missing. So to round out our tech-heavy team, we've added on advisors who are industry veterans and bring expertise in business development, tech commercialization, related product development. Next. And because of that, our strong team, we've been able to make a lot of progress in a short amount of time. Before we got started, we already got our first issued patent. Then 2020, we licensed that, got started with the SBIR grant from the NSF, and have hit some major milestones, including be able to demonstrate cell all the way to sequence using our platform for the prep. And on top of that, we've been able to sequence the entire human genome off of a single finger prick droplet of blood loaded directly onto our chip. So there's no like pre-processing occurring. I think that just kind of shows the power of our platform, and we're pretty excited about where that might take us. So next, yeah, next again. So this year we were issued a second patent, and we've begun reaching back out to potential early adopters. We're now working with 6 of them, including one sequencing company. And we're iterating our product offering and engineering specs. And the next thing that we want to focus on then is to demonstrate the manufacturing scalability of our chip so that by 2022, we can be engaging a foundry and printing our chips and offering a service while we finish building up the platform and getting that leased out. And that's all going to be traction towards our Series A. And if we can then hit the market at scale, then we really believe that we can alleviate a lot of the sample prep problems that people are experiencing and accelerate the growth of the overall long read market. Next. So this is our final slide. Again, we're a platform, and our beachhead is going to be in long read sequencing. But that's not the only application that is in need of sample prep streamlining. There's many markets, many applications that all need sample prep streamlining. Ultimately, I'll just close by saying that signs point towards a coming revolution with genomics. Similar to how the computer revolution changed society, genomics is likely going to do the same. But the computer revolution couldn't have happened if computers weren't democratized first and made accessible to everybody, not just people who know how to program or trained in computers. Similarly, genomics needs the same thing. That's what we want to do at INSOBIO. We want to make doing genomics more accessible so that we can enable the applications of tomorrow.
Thank you, INSOBIO. I'm going to turn it over to our panel.
Thank you, Harvey. definitely see the opportunity with what you're saying of making genomics more accessible, and would love to talk more with you offline about that, given a couple of other Cornell founders you should sync up with, share notes. But my question is, and you touched on this a bit too, but if you could dig a little bit more into why starting with long read. Some of the other buckets that you have in your pipeline, such as like neonatal testing, I saw you mentioned there, seem to have very sort of concisely defined willingness to pay and budget from the customer. So curious to hear a little bit more on the thought process there.
Yeah, it's been a journey for us to try and figure out the best approach towards any given market with our very kind of broad platform technology. And at first, it wasn't long read. We started with multi-omic analysis, and we had a lot of data coming from the academic development for that. Then we were thinking about like companies like 10x Genomics, Mission Bio, and these companies were doing such high throughput that we thought at the time, the customers we spoke to, they were more interested in that high throughput than they were interested in doing more depth of analysis. So we pivoted away from that, and we thought we'd go into metagenomic sequencing, where we also have a lot of value, and we are working with somebody out in Arizona, a medical facility out in Arizona, to develop that. But during the national ICOR, we figured out that the tech adoption cycle for that market is quite long. And it's going to take us a number of years to actually get to like a product on the market. You know, once you get a product working, it takes like 3 to 5 years to actually get it onto the market. You have to test with these big organizations like the Gates Foundation and stuff to really seed your technology all over the place and test it before you're really kind of allowed onto the market. So we wanted something that we could approach with a very small team, that we had customer segments that we understood already, that wasn't in something like the clinic where we needed CLIA certifications or other types of lab certifications and regulations to go through. And long read became kind of like a natural choice because, again, our co-founder Harold, he was involved in the founding of PacBio. So for us, it was kind of like a natural lineage. We already understood the technology going the downstream part very well, and we thought we could develop a very strong technology to fit in with the upstream part, and that's actually the case. And we're beginning to work with these people now, so it's very exciting for us.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Megan.
Hey, Harvey, I have a question about sort of the status of your development effort right now, and what's left to be done before you're at that point in the next year or two, I guess, where it's really ready for prime time, revenue generation, a recognizable service sort of thing. And I am not a healthcare expert at all. I've heard of sequencing. One of the things that I recollect hearing about was that when sequencing was first developed, it was a pretty phenomenal invention. But as an industry, it became commoditized very quickly. Mm-hmm. And today there's many sources, very cost effective, very quick, et cetera, et cetera. So if the field of sample prep is something that is similar and related to that, what does this additional development time that you expect to have to undertake, what does that mean in terms of your competitive advantage as you see yourself, really being out there offering a production solution? Is that something that's worrisome or not? And if so, why not?
I think that's a great question. So there's several parts to that. I'll just try to unpack it one part at a time. If I miss something, please just remind me again. But this map here, I hope you see it, is sort of how we think about our technology development, our product development. Right. And so this dotted line is kind of where we are now, and where we want to get to with our seed round is to finish up the steps of validation prior to production. And so in terms of the question of now sequencers are getting cheaper, they're being commoditized. Yes, that is happening. And that's also what is pushing the need for our market to grow. Because, for example, and I can't say who, but we talked to a potential pilot person, and she was saying that she just got off a call last week. She had 9,000 samples in a project. And so she's backlogged 9 months at her institution. If somebody submits a sample at the time we spoke to her, that was going to be Christmas before she got around to it. So that's how backlogged things are becoming, because sequencing is getting cheaper. So everybody wants to do sequencing because they can get tons of data on sequencing. But sample prep is still manual. Sample prep is still difficult and hard. And sometimes you go through the whole process and you don't get anything out of that. So you have to repeat that. And that's where we want to come in. I think it's hard to say exactly the timing, but I think the timing will be good, because what we see now is, for example, in February, Pacific Biosciences got a $900 million investment from SoftBank to go into clinical sequencing. And what they're going to need is more automation, more capabilities to handle sample prep on the front end. And although that's not necessarily where we start, and maybe we can work with them and OEM into one of their products or something like that, I think we're open to those options. But what we want to demonstrate first with a beachhead type of application is to show that we really have value for long read sequencing, and kind of get our name out there, get people to trust in our brand and our products before we sort of shift over the customer segments.
So even though the actual sequencing activity is working with DNA as you're working with DNA, as a material, do you think that there's a fundamentally different industry dynamic or onslaught of competitive pressure that the sample prep market is going to undertake or undergo as compared to what the actual sequencing market saw?
I think you're right. There is a lot of competition. For how we think about this is from the angle of adoption. So again, going back to our mission, I think we want to think about it as like, we want to increase accessibility as a priority, as our mission. And how are we going to do that is we need to increase adoption. What you see is tons of microfluidic technologies being developed for sample prep in the academic setting. And that's been going on for like 2 decades, right? And there's tons of startups that have gotten a lot of funding in, Series A, B, C, et cetera, for developing microfluidic technologies towards sample prep. So why don't we see these types of products in the customer's hands, in their lab benches? I think part of the answer to that is adoption. People aren't adopting these technologies because either the price point isn't right, or it's not offering enough of what they want to actually adopt it. And that's where we see our value proposition, is along these 5 key axes. There's 2 basic categories of products right now. There's the kit-based category and the automation-based category. And they both focus on different parts, but we can offer something more wholesome than that. We can cover the weak areas of each. Now, we also have a weak area ourselves. We aren't able to process exotic samples. So like, we're talking like species of plant samples or fish or some sort of exotic species. But the market for that is fairly small. Kits can continue excelling in that market. So that's not something that we're too worried about. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
If there's no more questions, thank you, Harvey. We're going to move on to organic robotics.
Thank you.
Hello, let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? I think that's a yes. I'm going to get started. Oops. So at ORC, with our lightless technology, we bring biometrics at the speed of light on the field in real time for athletes to prevent injuries as well as improve their performance. One of the biggest problems athletes have is that they get injured often, and therefore they have to miss days due to prolonged recovery times. This is also a financial burden for the teams, who in turn lose millions of dollars in revenue due to player unavailability and salaries. And currently, it's just not possible to capture motion and muscle fatigue at the same time in real time at high speeds and with no constraints on location. An example user you see here is a baseball pitcher who moves their shoulder at up to 7,000 degrees per second rotations. And this is where we believe Lightlace is going to provide the most value. What Lightlace is a soft and stretchable fiber optic sensor. So Lightlace uses light instead of electronics to measure motion, muscle activity, as well as respiration. And because it's so soft and thin, it can easily be integrated into garments to provide this information in real time without interfering with the athlete's motion. Here you see an upper body garment example. It has a removable electronic sub. This is actually way smaller now. This was our previous version. But the idea is that you can easily replace this hub and use it with other garments that also have light lace sensors. So if you have 5 garments, you still only need 1 hub. And from this specific garment, the user, in this case, the athlete, receives 3 sets of information: their muscle activity specific to each muscle group, their respiratory levels, as well as their tidal volume, and their motion. If you combine these informations, that information doesn't only help prevent injuries, but it also helps improve performance by individualizing the training process. Further, you can use this to improve the rehabilitation process and make better assessments for return to play decisions for athletes. So here's a quick run through of the solution. Athlete wears a garment and starts exercising, training, or the game session. Once they reach their limit, they'll either receive text alerts or their shirt will start glowing to let them know they're overworking a specific muscle group, therefore preventing the injuries. After the completion of the session, the athlete and the training staff can get together and use our app as well as web app to go over the progress, monitor it, and make decisions for the next game. And there are a lot of different technologies out there that are trying to advance player health and safety. And a couple examples are IMU sensors like the Modus sleeve, EMG sensors like Athos wearables, motion capture like Qualys's, and heart rate variability systems like the Whoop band. However, they all are dependent on electronics, whereas light lace is a photonics-based technology, so it doesn't have the limitations electronics have. In our company, we were able to measure at least 70 kilohertz at data speeds with light lace, and our closest competitor is at 1 kilohertz. And why this is important is because pitchers move really fast, they need data rates that are really fast as well. And this is not just for pitchers. By providing such high speeds data acquisition, we also provide the new set of information that was not available before. Further, with light lace, you can also measure muscle activity specific to each muscle group and on the field, not in an indoor facility setting, not depending on cameras. And because our sensors are soft and stretchable, they don't interfere with the motion of the athlete. They can be easily offer whole body coverage. They have high wash and wear tolerance. They're also easy to use and calibrate, making it the ideal solution for athletes worldwide. After conducting customer interview, we decided baseball is one of the most compelling markets for us to start with. And there are a couple reasons for this. So if you look at the financial reasons, if you look at the data from 2019, we see that Major League Baseball teams lost over $300 million due to players not being available and because of their salaries. And if we dive deep into pitchers, we see that they missed more than 18,000 days due to throwing injuries alone. And 20% of pitchers who had Tommy John surgery were not even able to return back to the game, making this a career-altering injury. We're currently in touch with two of the top Major League Baseball teams discussing pilots, which will be beginning in the next couple of weeks. Our adoption strategy not only includes MLB teams, but also includes collaborating with sportswear brands. We're also discussing these collaborations and partnerships with leading sportswear brands on how they can integrate our light lace solution to their garments and offer that to the user. We're also discussing working with leading research institutions across the US for validation studies as well as college-level athlete pilot testing. Our business model is dependent on software subscription. Even though our hardware is unique and provides a lot of value, such as softness, we are going to be offering data that was not available before. For that reason, we're going to use a tier-based subscription model, starting from the pro level and using that influence to move down the ladder to the average consumer, where there are going to be even more users. Our team that's bringing this technology to market includes me, Elida, who I did not introduce at the beginning, and my co-founder, Rob. We also have not 4, but now actually 5 engineers, 2 software and 3 hardware working alongside us. We're about to bring a biomechanist on the team as well. And we have an advisory board for providing us with their expertise in manufacturing, finance, sportswear, as well as business operations. So thanks to our amazing team, we have accomplished a lot in such a short period of time. 2019, we licensed 3 pending patents from Cornell and completed Luminate Accelerator. 2020 was a great year. We got accepted into Praxis. We sold a few lightweight sensors, and we also won our first SBIR grant from the National Science Foundation. We also signed a CRADA with the Air Force Research Lab to measure pilot fatigue under high G conditions to prevent G-LOC as well as improve high G training efficiency. I know we're only like 4 months into 2021, but we already accomplished so much, and this year is going to be the best so far until 2022. But the year started off with us not only competing, but actually winning the first prize at NFL's First and Future pitch competition focused on player health and safety. We were also recently awarded our Phase 1 grant from the Air Force to work with pilots. And we're currently working on a pre-seed round. And by the end of this year, we're expecting to have secured our partnership and also have data from not only commercial, but also DoD pilot testing through the Air Force. We also recently filed a provisional patent application through our company on our new hybrid sensors. And by the end of this year, we're very confident we're going to receive our Phase 2 awards from both NSF as well as Air Force. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Organic Robotics team.
Elida, I'm interested in what your vision of how the sensing garment gets used, for example, by a Major League Baseball team with a pitcher. Is this something that they put on when they're training and diagnose their movements and get coaching or advice in terms of how to modify their pitching delivery action? Do they wear it during a game? Is there any sense of, kind of real-time feedback that adjusts things? I'm really curious about how you get at that $300 million number that you had suggested that baseball has an opportunity to address with this.
Yeah, definitely. So there are 3 different ways this can be useful. 1 in the rehabilitation setting, 2 during practice and training, and 3 in game. We believe the most value is going to be on training as well as rehab instead of the game. And that's because in game, there's also more regulations. Plus, you don't want to notify an athlete in the middle of the game and distract them about like a potential wrong movement, but you can analyze it after. And also, yes, we can provide in real-time data, and we can display this information by making our light guides, our fibers glow different patterns instead of them having to always look at their phone or like have their phone vibrate. So that's how we're going to do this information display. But yeah, to answer your question, we're thinking it's going to be most useful at training, practice, and rehab.
And following up on that, do you think that there's an ability for the athlete to actually modify their pitching delivery motion such that you can, markedly reduce the likelihood of injury and Tommy John surgery and that kind of stuff? I wonder how much of the, once they get to that level of capability and performance, how much of their actions, their motions are really ingrained, in terms of physiological makeup and just the way they do things. I'm wondering how much can you really modify for those kinds of people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So we also, through our customer, found that these movements get set at really early age because pitchers specifically have been training for like years since they were very little. So for changing that movement, it's going to be more helpful for younger kids, but for older people, for professional athletes, they can use this to assess if they're doing something different than they already do because their bodies are already adjusted to a certain motion, which may not be the same for everyone. So this way you can individualize it and know that, oh, this specific pitch was very different than what you always do. So you should maybe take a rest or like there's something wrong going on. But again, like for, let's say, a middle schooler, it can be assessed by the training staff to say, this is a really risky motion. You should not do that and fix it at an early age.
Sure, and I just, sorry, go ahead, Megan.
Oh, sure, thanks. All right, sorry, my mute button's weird. Yeah, I was just curious to hear a little bit more about once you sort of capture that customer at the top of the pyramid that you showed there in particular, like how can you further deliver to that captured audience, right? Because it's that captive customer is very valuable, and you have the line of communication with them in such a way that it seems like there would be other opportunities to generate revenue and increase that LTV over time.
Definitely. So in the pitch, I showed an example of an upper body garment, but talking to pitchers and baseball teams, we found that it's not just the upper garment, even though it's the shoulder that moves really fast. There's a lot of information needed on the lower body, on the foot, as well as even in the form of a glove, like on the wrist. So I think one of the other ways we can provide value would be to not only focus on an upper body garment solution, but a full body solution, and have the sensors integrated into different form factors. And measured, obviously with different form factors, it means measuring something else with each.
That makes sense too. And I'm curious, well, oh, sorry, there's not much time left. Very interesting, we'll talk more offline.
Thank you.
Sure, I just had a quick question on sort of double clicking on market size. I mean, you mentioned a little bit on MLB. I'd love to understand how you came up with the size for the initial target market, and then what are sort of the concentric circles of adjacent markets around that, and ultimately how big of an opportunity this rolls up to.
Yeah, so there are numbers. If we actually talk about the numbers for market size, sports technology is 22 billion, wearables is 4 billion, and it's growing at a compound annual growth rate of around 22 to 24%. So it's not the fastest growing market, but specifically for MLB, the $300 million also comes from a research paper as well as market research that we did through our throughout our SBIR grant working with the NSF. But comes to other numbers. So one example would be NFL. For them in 2020, the revenue loss for injuries was over $500 million, not counting the first week. So technically, it is a larger loss compared to MLB, but due to the nature of our sensors, we think the most immediate need is in MLB. But again, that doesn't mean we're only going to work with baseball players. There's a lot of injuries in NFL, and we were awarded an award from them, which kind of like further validates and proves that there's a need there. I don't have the specific numbers for the other sports regarding injury costs to the teams. But the second thing we found that there are similar sports to baseball with the motion, like golf and tennis and softball. And we've had a lot of interest for them too. So our plan is to have the solution developed for baseball players first and use the same form factor, same data analysis for sports that have really similar motion, like golf will be the next one. And then eventually we'll move into the other sports like football and basketball. And I think football and basketball will be the first two because they're the biggest ones.
Thank you, Organic Robotics and judges. Next is Pelix.
Hello. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm sorry, where do I have to, oh, here we are. Sorry. Can everyone see that? Okay. All right, great. So I'll get started. Thanks for letting us present. My name is Dr. Jeremy Weigel. I'm an assistant professor of urology at Weill Cornell Medicine here in New York City. And I'm founder and CEO of Pelix. We're a clinical solutions provider for pelvic health, currently developing a medical device platform for disorders of the pelvic floor. Now, to understand what we're doing, you do have to understand a little bit about what the pelvic floor is and what it does. It's essentially the strap of muscles and nerves at the bottom of the pelvis. and it's responsible mostly for fecal and urinary continence. Disorders of the pelvic floor affect up to 60 million Americans alone. That means 1 out of every 4 adults in the United States is affected by something such as urinary incontinence, chronic pelvic pain, pelvic organ prolapse, and even certain types of sexual dysfunction qualify. So those are all pelvic floor disorders. And to just give a sense of the sheer size of this market, it's illustrative to think about what the single most common diagnosis within pelvic floor disorders is something called overactive bladder. That in and of itself is responsible for $20 billion expenditure per year. And quite honestly, current therapies work reasonably well. The way to think about therapies for this disease set is in 2 broad categories. There's some outliers that don't qualify, but in general, there is a set of active pelvic floor physical therapy regimens that are usually mediated via biofeedback, like EMG biofeedback. And then there's a neurostimulation, like a passive neurostimulation sort of group. And as I said, both of these treatment paradigms actually have good clinical results. Really, the problem is in access and delivery of these treatments. And based on our insight work and conversations with dozens of potential end users, we found really 3 hurdles that come up and again in terms of seeking treatment. One is the invasiveness associated with both surgery as well as invasive medical devices. There is a very large time consumption component associated with these treatments, specifically physical therapy, which can require multiple trips to a treating facility over time, up to 12 weeks at a time. There are both short and long-term side effects associated both with surgery as well as medications. And really, because of these hurdles, what happens is people end up shifting over to the right-hand part of the screen here, where they're using diapers, they're using pads, and they're sort of just kind of dealing with it. And that's where we see our opportunity, and really what our value proposition is bringing both of these treatments into the home and in a non-invasive manner. So we're actually improving access and we're improving delivery of these treatments. And our platform, one embodiment of which, as you can see here on the right-hand part of the screen, delivers both of these therapies. So we have an active EMG biofeedback mediated pelvic floor physical therapy module, that's a mouthful, and a passive neurostimulation module. In addition to this, we are also actively building a digital data tracking component. And this really comes from our insight work done with treating providers. It also comes from my own personal experience as being a provider who treats these conditions. Because this is such a complex treatment provider chain, people actually get lost to follow-up. So providers will recommend something and they really won't know whether or not there's been a good result or not. So by building this data tracking component, we offer that ability for doctors and other treatment providers to know whether or not what they're recommending is working, but it also allows for the possibility of personalization of the treatment. And personalization of pelvic floor disorder treatment is kind of the holy grail of treatment, because it's really not a one-size-fits-all type of treatment regimen, and being able to personalize it offers the ability to increase or improve outcomes dramatically. So we have identified our beachhead market as being the demographic of women 40 to 60 years of age who are either postmenopausal and or postpartum, who are suffering from urinary incontinence and milder forms of pelvic organ prolapse. We've identified this market because it's this segment because it's such a prevalent condition in this demographic, and there is a real need for a solution that can fit into people's lives. To position ourselves in the market, again, you do have to think a little bit about how the treatment sort of groups break down. Again, you have the active group and you have the passive group. And we're really uniquely positioned because, again, we have this dual modality in terms of treatment, but we're also non-invasive and can be offered at home. And because of all of these characteristics, and specifically because of the multimodality, we have the ability to treat up to 90% of all pelvic floor disorders. That's something no other competitor can match, and it's why we think we can become the treatment of choice for pelvic floor disorders. Now, to understand what our go-to-market strategy is, you do have to understand a little bit about what our technology rollout looks like. Although we are developing both technologies, one is further along than the other. And the one that we're going to be going to market first with is that EMG biofeedback physical therapy. So the way that again, based on lots of insight work, we found that people, when they're making a decision to seek treatment, they go to Dr. Google, they go to family members, but ultimately they still go to a treating provider to make the decision. So the way that our go-to-market strategy works is we win the recommendation of that treating provider. Now our device, our initial product will not need a prescription associated with it, but over and over again, the signal we have gotten, and I can say this again as a provider who treats these conditions as well, providers need robust clinical data, and they need the imprimatur of the FDA. We could go directly to the market as a wellness device, but that will not separate us at all within this market. So we develop our clinical data, we get our FDA approval, and that's how we win the recommendation. And then that patient takes a recommendation, goes to the e-commerce channel, makes the buy. We also have potential alternate additional revenue streams in addition to the initial device purchase, which we're expecting to be around $200. We do have a disposable component, and there even is the possibility of monetizing the digital component. Now, these revenue projections are, again, it's important to know that this is purely our first product offering, purely selling into our beachhead segment. If you believe our claim that we can reach up to 90% of all pelvic floor disorders, this is easily a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. So we're excited to announce that we have initiated our first clinical study. We're actually expecting to finish that up around the end of May. Assuming that we reach all funding milestones, which is obviously a huge assumption, we expect to have our FDA submission again for the first product offering by Q2 2022, and market entry by the end of 2022. We are currently raising our seed round. The seed round will get us again to that FDA submission. That includes verification and validation testing. It will also allow us to do initial marketing and branding exercises, as well as establish our small batch manufacturing. And it's important to know that we do have granularity in our ask. We can show how we can de-risk for less money, and we can show how we can de-risk for more money as well. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about our team. I am very excited about the folks that we have. I feel very fortunate to be working with the group of people that we have working on PELX. We have decades of experience in both clinical and consumer marketing, as well as product management development, as you can see by these mini bios on screen. We have everything in place to take our idea from concept to commercialization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, PELX. I'll turn it over to the judges.
Jeremy, can you describe in simple terms, if you will, what is your product and this combination of active and passive capabilities? It sounds like there's an existing market out there with services provided that fall into both of those camps. What is it that you have done to be able to ultimately pull together benefits from both sides into something that's simple and deliverable to this market?
So I think I'm going to need you to unpack that question a little bit. It sounds like you're asking, and I may be misinterpreting this, but it sounds like you're asking a technology question. Is that right?
A little bit. I guess what I'm trying to do is understand what's the nature of the innovation here in terms of the actual product or service that's used by your customers. And you talked about the fact that you're combining some of the capabilities or benefits from those two traditional areas of treatment. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? And why is it you're able to do that when there's a market out there that exists and these are all separate things that occur?
Well, I mean, to answer your last question first, I think it's because all these other companies have never been led by a physician that actually treats these conditions. But as far as the other stuff is concerned, without getting into detail about the underlying technology, really where our innovation lies is in the actual what we're calling our saddle, as well as the sensor array that we've developed. that actually allows us to capture the EMG signal in a non-invasive manner without needing placement of electrodes by like trained professionals or something like that. So that's where the innovation on the EMG side comes from. And then so the neurostimulation, it is helpful to understand that we are actually targeting a novel pelvic nerve. The nerve that we are targeting has actually only been accessed percutaneously. So that's like with a tine through the skin, kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with the product InterStim. It's something that's used in overactive bladder, and it's literally like a pulse generator that's implanted in the buttock. And then there's an electrical tine that delivers a pulse signal. And that's essentially what neurostimulation is, but that's obviously surgery and invasive. So we've actually identified a way, again, it's through our saddle, that actually allows us to access this nerve transcutaneously. And no one's ever been able to do that before.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Hi, this is Glennis. I'd also like to add that foundational to most pelvic floor disorders is dysfunction of the muscle and neuronal network. And by actually addressing both of those networks in a very robust manner externally, I think is what's novel about our approach. There's no other product that does that addresses both and also addresses it in an external manner.
Right.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Last question I have, in terms of the market segment you're pursuing, these females age 40 to 60, just to sort of calibrate how big that is in a developed market like the US, what percentage of women age 40 to 60 either have a condition of this nature or would go seek assistance from professionals to deal with what they think is this kind of problem?
So I think it's best if Glennis answers this.
Hi, yeah. So based on just market research that's available, we have a plurality of women who at some point in their lives who are postpartum will experience symptoms of one sort or another. Basically, right now, the addressable market is very similar to that's in the disposable space. So we're thinking of incontinence pads. We're thinking in terms of the market, such as the Kegel exercisers. And so if you looking at market opportunities, we have a similar market opportunity just in the incontinence space along those lines.
And just to put numbers on that, if you look at the relevant clinical data, the number that usually comes up is 1 in 3. So 1 in 3 women in that demographic, and actually that number gets higher as you go higher in the sort of the age demographic. But I would bet. And the reason why I say this is because of all the conversations that we've had, my own interactions, and just recruiting for our clinical study, that number is actually significantly higher.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
So just a quick, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go for it. I went first last time.
So just a quick one on efficacy. Kind of what data did you have heading into the clinical trial that gave you the confidence to pursue that clinical trial that you would likely or hopefully see some efficacy? And then part 2 is how are you constructing the trial? Number of participants. What are kind of the milestones, key indications?
Okay, so to answer your first question, so this is based the original prototype is based on a very large body of evidence surrounding what we call biofeedback mediated pelvic floor physical therapy. It literally is called that. I'm not just trying to be wordy when I say that. And there's about 20 years of data that shows that if you can't, and really there's so many different ways to offer this, but basically if you can offer at least one treatment a week with biofeedback, 60 to 80% of urinary incontinence in the demographic that we're targeting will improve. So that's where the confidence sort of in the background came in. As far as the clinical study is concerned, I want to be honest, I'm a little bit reluctant to go into detail about what the clinical study, like what's involved completely, but in general, it's non-blinded. It's essentially we're recruiting subjects essentially through our website to trial the device for 4 weeks. They're using it 5 times a day for 10 minutes a day. And then they're using the ICIQ before and after to judge objective response. And we're also doing, obviously, a lot of consumer insight work around it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Pellix team. We'll
Thanks
move
a
on
lot.
to our last competitor, Simba.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ava Sadeghi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Simba, the leading talent development platform. Our story begins with my own. I was a student in my undergraduate studies in Tucson, Arizona, and all the opportunities I wanted for internships were in big cities like New York, London, DC. I felt incredibly stuck by my geography. Then something incredible happened. I became one of the very first remote interns with the US Department of State, based all the way in Washington, DC. This was almost a decade ago, back in 2012, when remote internships were not a thing. It was a game changer for me. But not only for me, it was also incredible for the State Department. They could expand their talent pool to bring on students like me in Tucson, Arizona, in Miami, Florida, in Bismarck, North Dakota, and all around the world. Over 5,000 students interning remotely. And that's when I realized that remote work could be a unique avenue to opening up the workforce. And so in 2017, when I was a human rights fellow with Congressman John Lewis, I helped co-found Simba as an action project to level the playing field for millions of students just like me. When we got started in 2017, you might imagine that talent leaders told us remote internships would never happen. They told us that it was a pain to manage interns. I don't know if you've ever managed an intern, but it's a lot of work. We sat down with over 250 talent leaders before we wrote a single line of code. And here's what we learned, that there's no structure to internship programs. Almost every company, Fortune 500 and more, they all do their internship program, apprenticeship completely different than the next. They use on average 11 different platforms to run a 12-week program. And there's poor data collection because there's no centralized hub. With all these pain points, we understood what solution we needed to build. And that's how we designed Simba. And it's Simba not for the Lion King, but for symbiotic relationships. Our goal at Simba is that every user on the platform gains value from the experience. And we're proud to say that today we work with some big names like Robinhood, Chewy, Genentech, MGM Resorts, and more. And we've been getting noticed by the media. Forbes named Simba one of the leaders behind the remote work revolution. We've been excelling rapidly. In the last year, we've had incredible growth. We've had over 750K ARR and are about to hit 1 million this quarter. We brought on millions to our sales pipeline and are very proud to say that we have maintained a 100% renewals with all of our customers across the board. And now to share a little bit about how the platform is built, I'm excited to pass it over to our co-founder and CTO, Nikita Gupta.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nikita Gupta, Simba's co-founder and CTO. I graduated from Cornell in 2017 with a degree in computer science at the College of Engineering. Using my knowledge from my undergraduate studies, I helped build Simba from the ground up. Simba is helping companies manage and scale their programs and is helping companies create symbiotic relationships between the employers and the program participants. One of our first features is this Launchpad page. And this page is helping companies save more than 80% on onboarding time. They're able to populate this page with a lot of useful content for their program participants to have access to anytime before, during, and after the program. Next up, we have the project board. And this helps save companies more than 35% of their time in their project workflow. Simba's project feature helps integrate with tools like Trello, Asana, Jira, SharePoint, and so much more, and is providing all managers with a lot of oversight on managing their projects for their interns and program participants. Next up, we have instant feedback. When I was an intern at Apple a few years ago, it was very frustrating to track personal performance because I never got feedback. Now we've made it really easy for all users to request feedback whenever they want. We also help companies send out surveys every 2 weeks or even in the middle or end of the program to help them track the success of their program. That task usually takes them 15 plus hours, but we've reduced it down to just 2 minutes with our instant feedback and surveys feature. And we have an engaged video gallery. This is the fun place for organizations to host their social events, post executive speaker series, TEDx talks, and recorded webinars. Our discussion board has also allowed a lot of engagement between all of the different users, the managers, and the program administrators. We also have the community page, and this is one of the most exciting features on Simba's platform. This is where all of the users came together. Our users were logging into Simba about 7 to 9 times a day, and it really fostered more engagement and collaboration amongst their cohort. And last, but definitely not the least, is our dashboards feature. This is the killer feature that is exciting leadership across all organizations. It helps companies track the metrics that matter to them most and ensure that their program is a success. And now I'll pass it back to you in the studio, Ava.
Thanks, Nikita. And so we're proud to say that our customers have loved building Simba with us. Nikita is an incredibly talented engineer, and we've been able to do very unique focus groups and roll out new designs with them. So much of what you just saw is actually requests from our own customers. Robinhood says that we solve a lot of their challenges. They scaled from only 25 interns to over 100 on our platform. And Chewy is scaling by over 600% on Simba. We believe that our customers are our champions, and we're excited to continue growing with them. And our pricing model is pretty straightforward. We are a B2B SaaS company, so we charge an implementation fee plus the number of users on a monthly rate, and we do all annual contracts, and that is pretty standard for all of our customers. Our average contract value right now is around $50,000, but just last month we actually signed one for $200,000, so that is scaling pretty quickly as well. And so we're excited to share our larger vision with Simba with you. Yes, we are starting off with the internship space, but it's the perfect way to land into the HR and the remote work market. Our customers are coming to us and saying, can we use Simba for our early talent development programs, for our early hires? Can we use this for something at large? And so because of that, we are very excited to keep growing and scaling. It is the perfect entryway into the market. My co-founder Nikita and I are incredibly passionate about this space. Our entire team of 12 brings decades of experience with remote work, talent development, and HR. And we've been backed by leaders in this space, from human capital management, future of work, and more. We're proud graduates from the Techstars program and have been backed by leaders like 1517 Fund, Hustle Fund, January Ventures, and more. This year, we have some exciting updates. We are very excited to raise our Series A that we're planning to launch next month and hit 5 million ARR by the end of this year, as well as launch Simba 3.0 that builds more connectivity amongst hybrid and distributed teams. We invite you to join us and open up the workforce with Simba. Thank you again for the opportunity today.
Thank you, Simba. I'll turn it over to the investor panel.
Thanks. Ava, Nikita, great presentation and great to see you. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about especially going into the Series A2. What are some of the benchmarks of ROI that you're hearing from your current customers as being great to sort of merchandise for potential sales to other customers?
Great question. And I'm so glad that you asked that, because one of the biggest channels of our sales is actually our current customers talking to each other, making referrals. That's how we met Genentech, was through a referral from Robinhood. And one thing that they are benchmarking is, as Nikita mentioned, the feedback collection. So that is like clearly cost and time savings. But then the second thing they're benchmarking is scalability of their programs. Mm-hmm. So how much they've been able to grow their initiatives using Simba as well.
Got it. Actually, a follow-up to that with the feedback, how does the UX sort of account for or encourage people to give feedback who otherwise might be hesitant to give feedback just for regular normal behavioral hesitations?
It's a great question, and that's something that we our focus groups with the students as well as the HR leaders helped us determine on how to build not only the most easy and intuitive product, but to also foster more engagement and get those students to request more feedback. So take an intern, for example, in their own account, they have the option to just tag a different project or a specific task and send that manager the email on that feedback. And it's so easy because the manager can just submit that feedback in the email itself, and the intern gets to actually view the feedback that was given to them. So again, it's just a lot of collaboration and so easy to request feedback, and it doesn't intimidate that intern to request feedback, on a frequent basis rather than just waiting for their every 2 to 3 week one-on-one meeting. Sorry about the background noise. Yeah.
So I'm curious about your perception of likely competition. I imagine starting with interns has been, sufficiently off the beaten path of HR systems that, you've been able to, have people appreciate what's unique about what you're bringing to the party. But if you popularize this new intern going to remote workforce notion, there's no shortage of HR systems providers out there. Who do you worry about the most from a competitive standpoint?
Great question. So you're right, like our niche and our beachhead into the market is by starting off with that young talent development. But on average, if you were to put together tools like SharePoint, Asana, Trello, Basecamp, Slack all into one, it would give a lot of the features of what Symba offers, but there's no direct competitor that is doing what Symba is doing. In fact, it's not just like all of the tools that we're putting together, but the most exciting element about Symba is that we're bringing together and fostering more engagement and community between these distributed teams. And that's what makes Symba stand out, especially amongst the customers. But with our research though, we're actually helping companies integrate those tools into Symba's platform. So we're not trying to replace those project management tools or other tools that they might be using, but instead they can seamlessly integrate that with Symba to enhance their experience.
And I'll just chime in there a little bit too, because I think that if like a Microsoft Teams started going and crowding into the HR space and building that functionality, that would definitely scare us. So as far as like answering the question of what we are terrified about, but we are trying to stay stealth mode and slowly grow and expand within each of our clients, which we have already been doing.
And then just a really quick one from me. I'd love the lightning round walkthrough of the unit economics. So what's the typical account size? You mentioned 100% retention. That's awesome. How much does it cost to acquire those customers? What's the gross margin profile?
So right now, it costs us about $2,000 to acquire an account of about $50,000. So, and that's based calculated purely off of the time to acquire from demos and all. And as far as we're still figuring out the lifetime value because it's just getting bigger and bigger. Like the one that we're signing with Genentech should be around $100,000 contract, but it's very exciting because Genentech is only one small section of Roche, their parent company. And the person who is excited to work with us says that, there's a very exciting global opportunity of over 5,000 users on the platform. So I think we're still figuring out the answer to the latter part of your question.
And gross margins?
I mean, right now, we're a SaaS company, so eventually around 90%. Right now, it's about 37% in our projections.
Got it. And is the 100% retention, is that
That's based off of renewals of contracts.
Got it. Thank you. And sorry for the webcam difficulty.
No worries.
If there are no more questions, thank you to Team Symba.
Thank you.
This concludes the 2021 BenDaniel Venture Challenge competition. I want to give a virtual round of applause to all the pitch competition, our competitors, as well as our panel of judges. I also would like to thank the CREA staff and event staff. Without them, none of this would have been possible. And I would also like to thank the attendees for your continued support of entrepreneurship at Cornell, as well as Big Red Ventures. Look forward to seeing you all in the future.
Super.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Zach Schulman.
Great, thanks, Grant. So thanks everyone for tuning in. That does wrap up our day one of celebration. The winner of the BenDaniel Venture Challenge will be announced tomorrow at around 4 o'clock, just after Martha Pollack does her interview with the former head of the Atlantic Philanthropies, and after we give Chuck Feeney his well-deserved Lifetime Achievement Award. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Eastern for our first event tomorrow, which is a fireside chat with Bob Langer, who most of you know is the co-founder and scientific director at Moderna. And just as another reminder, tomorrow you'll use the same exact link as you just used to watch the BenDaniel Venture Challenge. So it's just live.alumni.cornell.edu. Same sign in. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow and have a wonderful evening. Thanks a lot. And thank you to the judges, by the way, as well. Okay, we'll see you soon.